Sadly, the church is in decline today.
If truth does not exist, we will not be able to live and function as civilized individuals in a society.
Students in the public education system at large of our nation are left with the impression God's irrelevant because he's never mentioned.
We sort of have national Alzheimer's. Here we are, the freest country that the world has ever seen, with more individual freedom and opportunity to choose what you want to do with your life and where you want to go to church. We have that, and we forgot how we got here.
So we're going to answer the question, why all the fuss?
Despite ever-increasing efforts to undermine the authority and accuracy of God's Word, the Bible stands firm.
Science and the Bible are inextricably linked.
We see evidence of incredible design.
God has made it incredibly clear.
Men, listen to me today. God has a calling on your life. Kids need you. Women need you. Our country needs fathers and responsible husbands today.
55 out of 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Bible-believing, church-attending Christians.
We have the longest ongoing constitutional republic in the history of the world. The Western world was successful because it was built upon biblical values.
All right, thank you. So this session has two basic purposes. And I love to get this talk when I first am in a youth group or at a college or I'm at church, because it lays out this groundwork for our responsibility as Christians. God expects us to represent him, to share the truth, to be truth to people who don't know the truth. And I will often go into, often been in many colleges, or I'll be with a group of people that's from a somewhat liberal church, and I'll start to lay out all the evidence for creation and show them from biology how absolutely clear things are, and from geology and from physics and astronomy, how you can look and you can know that the Bible's true. And I can see something in their eyes, especially young people, because they'll look right at you. And you can just tell from facial expression they're skeptical. And I can almost read their mind. They're saying, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but how can all the experts be wrong? How can all the textbooks be so wrong? How can all the museums be so wrong? And National Geographic and the Smithsonian and the park systems and all this stuff I hear on the internet. And my teachers, they're really sincere. They're smart. They're educated. These people, they have PhDs in biology. You don't. They have PhDs in geology. You don't. How can they possibly all be so wrong? So that's what this is really about. If we can't answer that question, there is no amount of information you're going to be able to pile on somebody that's going to change their mind. And the other thing is, I'll be invited to college groups at a college campus, and you'll do a session, and you get mostly a few kids from the Christian College Club, but occasionally a bunch of graduate students will show up, and I literally feel like I'm surrounded by a bunch of hyenas. And they've got the got you questions. I so respect what Charlie Kirk did, because that is so stressful. And I'll come back to this in a second, yeah. But they've always got an excuse. They've always got a comeback. They've always got another gotcha. But Charlie would just take them to the obvious. He would just bring them back to the obvious, to the central issue. He was talented at that. And as you're talking to your relatives and your kids that are off to college and they don't seem to have an interest in Christianity, and coworkers, and even Christians who are completely bought into what the world is teaching, and they don't even realize it, I'm going to just show you a few things that you've heard in different ways, but I probably present it a different way, that just will help you bring them back to the obvious, because that's what God has told us to do. And this talk is really called Blind to the Obvious. How can smart, intelligent, sincere people be so blind to what God says is so obvious? Now, it really is just going to hit on 3 points. There are 3 absolutely fantastic, incredible illusions that are presented and believed and taught as if they are reality. And they're not. They're not reality. They're fantasy. And we're going to look at those 3 things. And here they are. What I call them, there are 3 impossible beliefs. They're impossible because God told us to take dominion over creation. The very first command to Adam and Eve in chapter 1 of Genesis at the very end is to take dominion over creation. Now that's an ancient word from Hebrew that had been translated in 500 years ago in the King James Bible to dominion. But if you look at the roots of the word, it means to study and understand and control. God told us to study, understand, and control creation. We don't own it, but he gave us stewardship over it. Now that is science. God's very first command to mankind was to do science. And then I'll get to that verse in a moment, in the book of Romans, he said, and this is the context of that verse, every human being who has ever lived is without excuse for belief in God by observing what he has made. So there can't be a contradiction between science, the observing of creation, and the belief in God. But here's those 3 beliefs. Number 1, the Big Bang, that everything made itself, all of the time, space, energy, and matter. And everybody's heard of the Big Bang. I've spoken in 17 countries. I've repeatedly returned to the high schools. In this year will be 9 countries, and they've all heard of the Big Bang in the developing nations. Second, that chemicals can come alive. All by themselves, chemicals can just come alive. There are now, you can Google this, and I don't trust everything I get on Google, but I think in some cases it really is trying to look for what is the trends. There's in the range of about 70% of people in America, in the church and outside of the church, that believe aliens exist. They are reality. I'll come back to that in a moment. And last, that life has a common source, which is the bacteria. A bacteria turned into a human being. Now, all of those are taught as absolute scientific facts throughout our culture. The majority of people you interact with believe all 3 of those things are true. So the question is, what do we do about it? And by the way, what underpins all of them are the millions and billions of years, because without that, none of them could possibly be true. Now, here's a picture out of a textbook. This is a reconstruction of a bunch of bones that was found. Now, this goes back about 30 years, a 30-year-old biology book. It was called a Megastrosgodon. And it said, and this is a quote, "This well-preserved skeleton of the Megastrosgodon is our earliest ancestor." Now, what they're really saying is that is grandpa. Well, great grandpa. And that makes it okay. Now, it's easy to just make fun of people who believe different than us, and that's not the way to go about it, because you have to understand, they have been trained to think this way from the time they were little kids getting board books in the public library. And there's only 2 possible options for explaining why we are all sitting here. Either God literally created 2 people. One day here on planet Earth, there were no people, and the next day there's 2 fully formed adult human beings, and all of us came from them. That's one possibility. Or something that wasn't a human turned into a human. That's the only other option. Now, you send your kids off to college and they stand up in a biology class and say, "I think people just appeared on this planet because God made them." They will be ridiculed, persecuted, laughed at, and very likely be getting lower grades in that class as the professor keeps an eye on them. That's the world we live in. That's considered absurd by probably 80% of the culture right now. That option. That means the other one has to be true. Well, what turned into us? It must have been something that looked a little like us. Well, the only thing like that's a monkey or an ape.
What turned into the monkey or ape must have been something running around on 4 legs. Therefore, this is a fact of science in the minds of those people trained to think that way. Just realize that. It's not laughable. It's the only option left. If in your heart you choose to say, there is no God. I'll come back to that in a moment. Now, here's that command. And by the way, this is really, really, really an important scripture. That which may be known of God is obvious to all people, for God has shown it unto them. The invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. We can see what he's made. Being understood by the things that are, we can even know his very power and his nature, his Godhead. So everyone's without excuse. No one, whether they've heard of Jesus or not, is going to go to heaven someday just because they didn't have enough knowledge. Because we're all guilty of worshiping, following, and obeying God because we can look at what's been made and know it couldn't have made itself. Now that's what I'm going to get to. Now, one last Bible verse before I jump into this. We are without excuse. Here's the very next verse that I don't often come to. It says, if we choose to believe, suppress the information for creation, we will become foolish in our thinking, and professing to be wise will literally become fools. Now, that sounds like an insult, doesn't it? Twice in the book of Proverbs, it says, the fool says, in his heart, there is no God. Doesn't say the fool says with his lips, there is no God. Our heart doesn't talk. Our heart is our beliefs. Our heart is the essence of who we are. If in our heart, and I don't think this is just about saying because our heart doesn't speak. In our heart, what we believe leads to our actions. If we run around in any area of life acting like God didn't exist, guess what that is? Foolishness. If we run our finances if God doesn't exist, it's a foolish way to live. If we vote for people who oppose the principles of the Bible, it's a foolish way to vote. If we entertain ourselves in a way that dishonors the one who made us, it is foolishness. So don't apply this to ourselves, not just those who are denying God's very existence. It goes way beyond that. Now, could the universe make itself? The reason God said take dominion over creation, the reason he said take control over it, observe it, is twofold. One, so we will know he exists. Because it gives us confidence that there's something beyond us. It gives us confidence that there's a moral reality. And it gives us confidence that there's someone that cares beyond us, no matter how bad things get. But we hear about the Big Bang. Now, if you think about the whole universe, real simple. None of this, you don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to share the truth with a culture that's lost. I want you to think of the whole universe as this box. Now, this is a little jewelry box. It's got a zipper, and I can open it up, and it's got jewelry inside, like finely crafted, colored things. Think of those as the plants and the animals. They're really complex, beautiful stuff here on Earth. So this is the entire universe right here. Now, the question is, where did this box come from? Either, once again, just like people, there's two choices. Either the box made itself, or something outside the box made the box. That's really easy. You could ask a 1-year-old, do you think Daddy made the box, or do you think it just poofed and made itself? The 1-year-old will get it. God, something outside the box made the box. That means God's not part of the box. That means God's not part of time. All these concepts are so important. That means God lives in the past, present, and future all at the same time. He sees everything that's ever going to have happened to you before you even existed. In the New Testament, it says, before we were born, God knew us. In the Old Testament and the New Testament. So you've got those two choices. Now, how do we know which one's true? First of all, this is how prevalent the Big Bang thinking is. If you want to believe the box and everything in the box, life, the planets, space, energy, time, matter, it all made itself, you can't start with something. If you start with something, you have to explain where the something came from. So the Big Bang literally starts with the belief there was nothing, absolutely nothing. Now here's some book titles, okay? The Birth of the Universe from Nothing. These are all written by PhD physicists. A universe from nothing. The universe from nothing to love. Creating a universe from nothing. And here's Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, where he's just trying to explain how gravity could explain the universe. Well, where did gravity come from? Well, from nothing. See, that's where they have to start if you're going to leave God out. Now, here's a little video I found that's trying to train students how to know where they came from, where everything came from. I'm going to show you the first 20 seconds.
I'm Jana, and I'm a professor of physics and astronomy. I work on where it all started. The simplest picture of the Big Bang starts with nothing. There's really nothing. There's no space, there's no time, there's no matter, there's no energy. It's nothing, but the potential to exist. And out of that bursts the universe.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Now, you're laughing, but this is serious stuff. Kids are going to hear this over and over and over and over again. The Big Bang made everything, the time frame, everything happened so fast, it accelerated faster than the speed of light, it slowed down at exactly the right instant, and stars started to form. And by the way, I'll get to stars in just a second. Now, do you think, she said all time, space, energy, matter came from nothing. If she had evidence to support that, she would have showed the evidence. What do you think? Doesn't that make sense? She has no evidence. There is no evidence. It's a belief system. See, that's the place to bring people back to. Where'd that come from? Where'd that come from? Where'd the first thing come from? When they realize they have nothing and they don't want to say it came from nothing, then you have faith that nothing turned into everything. But let's look at what science shows. The most tested, most observed, most experimented with law of all science, it's called the first law of science, says matter and energy can never be created or destroyed. And it transcends every area of science, from biology to physics to chemical engineering, which is what I am. The law of conservation of energy and mass. You can never get something out of something you didn't start with. Energy can be matter, and matter can change into energy, but you get the same amount of stuff you started with. So we absolutely know, as a scientific fact, the universe couldn't have created itself. There's only one option left. Something outside of the physical universe had to have made it. Now that's a belief, without a doubt. But it's a logical belief that doesn't contradict what we know about the observations of science. See how that goes? It's those guys who are living in fantasy land, but they're pretending that we do, when the opposite is actually true. Now, at the end of each of these sections, see, I'm a third done. And then I'm going to do biology, then I'm going to do the geological record, geology. Well, one more example. We're told 100 trillion stars in the Milky Way all made themselves, and yet they're constantly blowing up and burning out in supernovas. And yet our galaxies and other galaxies are still there. So physicists routinely teach as a fact of science, gravity pulls gas together to form stars. Now, there's a law of science, never been an exception. You leave gas to itself uncontained, it always spreads out. It always goes from high pressure to low pressure because the molecules are bouncing and bumping and they move out. Gravity is about 1 billion times weaker at the distance of atoms in outer space than the law of the gas law, which wants to force those molecules apart. And we can even test this. You know, I've got high pressure here, low pressure in there. When I open the valve, all the gas in this room doesn't suck down into the can. It goes outward. Or when I blow up a balloon, I can't do that experiment. Bummer, I didn't bring a spare balloon. But you could do it. Blow up a balloon, it expands, the pressure's about the same inside and outside, and try to shove the gas molecule, try to shove the balloon smaller. It had an enormous amount of force shoving it outward. And we've never seen a star form in the history of observation, other than potentially the night Jesus was born. There's not any picture we've taken where here's the space 10 years ago, here's the space today, there's a new star. The laws of science show us it can't happen. So it's all fantasy to try to explain it without God. See, God said he did certain things miraculously. He did them outside of natural processes. The creation of the universe, the creation of time, space, and matter, the creation of life, the creation of stars. But everything else short of miraculous intervention, specific to prayer typically, it works and proceeds by natural processes. We can see those processes so we can know certain things can't have made themselves. So we know that. So how can people be so blind? Here's example number one. The man who started the subject of psychology, the study of the human brain and how it operates, after studying people all his life, he was the first one to teach psychology at Harvard University in the late 1800s. This is the conclusion he drew while observing people. There is nothing too absurd to be believed if it's simply repeated often enough. We could believe nothing could become the whole universe if it's just we keep repeating it, and that's what's happened all around us. We could believe stars could make themselves violating the laws, natural gas law, if we just keep repeating it. All astronomers are taught that, and they start believing it and teaching it, even though it's never been observed. Now, let me show you a picture, and then I'm going to ask you a question. Okay, check out this picture. Okay, there's two letters there on the picture. And here's the question. Which square is darker, square A or square B? And just honestly answer, not thinking, oh, what's the trick involved? Almost anybody, it's obviously square A is darker. Well, if I take out all the surroundings and just leave square A and square B, that's what they look like. They are exactly the same shade, exactly the same darkness. Now, your eyes saw that. Your eyes knew exactly which one of those was lighter and which one was darker. Your brain would not allow you to interpret it that way. And I got more examples that are way, way more stunning than this. You see, your brain makes decisions based on the information it's gotten in the past, the information around it, consensus thinking, and almost all things depend on one's viewpoint in which they exist. When we're trained to think a certain way, it's really, really hard to force ourselves to see or perceive or believe a different way. And that's with something as visual as a visual image. It becomes much, much harder with a philosophical thing. And this is why God tells us over and over and over again, from cover to cover, things like this in the Bible. My word is the lamp unto my feet, thy word, and a light unto my path. Not polls, not opinions, not peer pressure, not how we want to interpret God's word. What is it meant to tell us? What does it actually say in context with all the rest of Scripture? And it's always going to be true. Now, number two, could chemicals come alive? We live in a culture where this, in the last generation, has been trained with hundreds of entertaining, exciting, thrilling movies that aliens are reality. And you see it everywhere. You know, this is Toy Story and Star Wars and, whoops, let me back up because they come up by themselves. And Stitch and E.T. and Star Trek and all these movies, Transformers, Spider-Man, the Avengers movie, they all are filled with aliens. And every time the people around us see that, they don't think it, but it is implied life has come alive somewhere else in the universe all by itself. God is left out 100%. And that's the implication. And it's that entertainment they get constantly. But what does science show us? The simplest cell, a bacteria, has thousands of parts, and you can't even explain where one of them could have ever come from. Now, let me show you what I mean. What I have here is a model of a protein. Now, that's been referred to several times. We found undecayed proteins in dinosaur tissue. Proteins are like the most fundamental part inside of this living cell. Now, a cell, think of an automobile. Think of the whole car. A whole car is the cell. The engine is a working machine inside of that cell. That might be one of the proteins. Actually, it's going to have a lot of proteins. Each part of the engine is a protein. Now, if you think of an engine of a car, every part of that engine has a three-dimensional shape, and the shape has to be the right size or the engine's not going to work. You understand that? And they've all been designed by intelligence to be that shape and be in that position. That's what's happening in the cell. Every part has to be in the right place. Now, how do the parts of a cell obtain the correct shape? These proteins, they're the little parts of the machine. God takes smaller little molecules called amino acids, and there's only 20 of them. I want you to think of Lego blocks. If I had a bunch of Lego blocks, okay, where did my mask go? Hang on, it's right here. And I only had 20 different shapes. I had some little flat ones, and then I had some thicker ones, and I had some wheels, and I had a couple windshields, and there was only 20 different shapes. And I had thousands and thousands of those 20 different shapes. And then I blindfolded myself, and I put gloves on so I couldn't feel it, and I just started grabbing shapes and putting them together. What's the odds of the thousands of parts, there's only 20 different ones, I could get them all of them in just the right position, and when I was done, it would look exactly like a little airplane. You can actually do the statistics. If there's 20 shapes, to get exactly the right one of those in the right spot would happen once every 20 times. But to get two of them in the right place would happen once every 20 times once every 20, only once every 400 tries. To get three of them right would be once every 8,000 tries. The simplest protein is about 50 of these beads long, amino acids. And if one of them's in the wrong shape, the whole thing doesn't bend and fold and twist and form the right shape if they're not in the right place. Some of these proteins are 50,000 long. So what I'm going to show you is a very average protein molecule. Okay, so this one has about 3,000 amino acids. Everyone's in the right place, so the whole thing will bend and twist and fold to form the right shape to work as a part in the cell. That cell has about 1,000 different parts for it to function and live and reproduce. Statistics is science. The reason they have billion-dollar hotels in Las Vegas is because statistics works. You can statistically calculate what's the odds of getting 50 of these in the right place when there's 20 different ones to choose from. It's an absolute, and statistically you can't say impossibility, but it is. It's an absolute possibility. Every subatomic particle in the entire universe, all interacting simultaneously, every billionth of a second, and you could never even get them to one time form this shape correctly. We can't even explain where one part of life comes from. Now, the other bigger problem is all the parts have to be there at once or nothing works. It's like this mousetrap has 5 parts. It's got a wooden base. It's got this hammer to come over and snap down. It's got a latch to hold it back. And it's got a spring and a little catch. 5 parts, okay? So there's those 5 parts. Unless all 5 are there, nothing works. It's a piece of useless junk. An animal trying to slowly develop some new parts is wasting its energy until all of them are there. Now, I'm going to jump past a couple of these because I want to make sure I get to everything. Okay. Now, I want you to look at this bacteria that they found recently. They found a fossil of this down at the deepest layers of the rock layer, buried in the ocean early in the flood. And when they started to analyze its remains, they realized it has 7 perfectly formed gears at the back of the bacteria. They're using an electron microscope. You can put about 1,000 of these bacteria in the width of a human hair. And then there's 21 gears surrounding those purple gears. And that's so they'll all spin at the right direction, and they're a little cilia, little hairs attached to them. And those will all start spinning in the right speed. And then the little bacteria can just swim around and look for food, and it's got a little propeller. But what makes those little gears spin? They spent another 10 years studying other bacteria that were still alive, and they realized there is an electric motor driving each one of those purple gears. 7 little electric motors. And they analyzed the parts. Each of the parts or one of these proteins. It has to be exactly the right shape to twist and fold to form the right thing. The rotor and the stator and the positive charges and the seals and the rings and all that. So there's 40 different parts, and every one of them's going to be exactly the right shape. And they've all got to be in the right position. Now, there's no human being on this planet where you showed them a fan motor and said, do you think that motor just made itself because pieces in a junkyard got kicked and landed and turned into a motor? And where did the pieces come from anyway? Everybody knows it has tied incredible intelligence. And if you take out one part, it doesn't work. So evolution can't explain it. It simply doesn't work. It is so obvious. And this is just one little feature of one little engine. You can put 10,000 of those motors in the width of a human hair. It runs at 95% efficiency, can stop in a quarter turn at 20,000 RPM and reverse itself. No human motor comes close to that type of performance. And we pretend, and we send our children through a school system where they learn to believe it all made itself. It's almost child abuse. Now, I want to do an experiment because I love experiments because that's how you learn things in science. You try things. So I have what I call my parade of man. Supposedly apes turned into people. I can't get an ape in here. I need a little machine, so I'm going to use a pin, which is a machine. And I'm going to take the tip off, and I'm going to drop it in the can. And then I've got a little rubber sleeve that I'm going to drop in the can, and the ink cartridge. And at the other end, there's a clip, so it'll go in my pocket. And it's got a button, so it'll go click, click, click. And a little clicker mechanism, and a tube. 6 parts. Now I have, those would be, each one of those parts would be like one of the proteins, but this is just molded plastic. This is 1,000,000 times more complex than every one of those parts. Way more complex, way more information content. This is just molded plastic, but you know they've been designed to be that shape to become a pin. But if I have all the parts, can I add energy? Will that transform it into a pin? And I like to do this. By the way, this is one of the things we do overseas when we go to every one of these high schools with students to get them to think outside of the box, to think what made the box and everything in it. You got to think outside of the box. And they realize that. You can't spin it, you can't throw it. But they've all heard of the Big Bang, so I tell them, well, what we need to do is add a lot of energy. So I have a firecracker. And this is especially fun to do in schools. And they're not near as hung up over there as we are here because they don't go around shooting each other yet. Okay, so I'm going to add the firecracker. Boom! Oh, I can't believe it. I hate it when this happens. There's the pin. Oh. Now, that's the response, except you do it with 1,000 kids overseas. The laughter's roaring out of the building, okay? Now, you just laughed at the idea that 7 parts could come together because of random energy being added. We can't even explain where the parts came from. Think about what we're doing as a culture. We are teaching as a fact of science that if you just throw a billion years at it, 1 billion years ago here on Earth, 1,000 way more complex parts that we can't explain where they came from all came together to form life. When every experiment every scientist has ever done in every laboratory shows chemicals never come alive. Even when they cheat by starting with chemicals that are only made inside of life, it never comes alive. We know the truth, and we're held accountable for it. Because if we know God exists, we also know it's our responsibility to obey him. And he's put a consciousness in us, and we all know that we don't. See, we can't pay for that sin. We can't pay for that price. Now here's example number 2 of how people can be so blind. Watch this little demonstration.
Now, as I step into this room, it should be quite obvious that something is wrong, but can you figure out what it is? Your mind may tell you that I have grown smaller. Of course, you know that that really isn't true.
Looking for my phone.
Your eyes, however, are telling you the truth. They're telling you that the floor is tilted up, that the ceiling is tilted down, that the walls are badly distorted, that the windows would be almost impossible to make drapes for them. Yes, your eye is telling you all this, but your mind simply refuses to believe it. But maybe this will help. Imagine all of this without benefit of vitamins. But it also works the other way, too. Now, if you'll just step back a bit, you'll see the real cause of the trouble.
It's quite obvious at this distance, isn't it? Sloping floor, tilted ceiling, distorted walls. But since you understand this, you shouldn't have a bit of trouble from now on, should you? Or should you? In this house, faces at the window seem to come in assorted sizes, don't they? But there's nothing wrong with the faces. It's those windows and what they're doing to your brain, remember? A small one and a tall one. Let's see if we can even things out a bit. Oh, no, that's even worse. It comes as a distinct shock to most people when they realize how limited and how inaccurate the human senses really are.
See, your brain sees things the way I see things they really are. But your brain's trying to make those windows make sense of them. They're really tilted at an angle. There's one's smaller, one's bigger, but it wants to make them the same size. And it does that. You don't even know it's doing it. You can't make it not do it. That wasn't trick photography. That was just your brain not letting you see reality because it's been trained. Those people should be the same size as the windows they're looking through when they weren't. Now, again, trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not on your own understanding, because we don't even understand how we've been misled, how we've been trained to think that isn't right, the stuff we've been told that may not be true. And we drag all that into our Christianity without even realizing it. And then we read the Bible and we try to force it to conform to what we think is true when it's not even true. Acknowledge him, and then he'll direct your paths. Could a bacteria become a person? See, I'm only doing 3 little examples, just 3 little illustrations, but they're so over the top irrefutable that you can share these kind of things with other people and then they have to deal with them. See, the Bible says God's word is truth, and truth is like a 2-edged sword. It cuts to bone and marrow. Because when you put truth in front of somebody, and C.S. Lewis said this, they either have to line their thinking up with the truth, or they have to become stupider. And I don't think he was being mean, but that's literally what you have to do. To hang on to a dogma or a belief or fit in with what everybody else is doing, if truth is kindly and lovingly put right in front of you, you've got that choice. You got to deal with it. But we've got to put it in front of people. So here's the biggie. We're told that there's lots of variations of lizards because one slowly evolved into another. Dr. Hopkins, he's explaining marvelously in great detail how that variety came about. And it's all programmed in to begin with, all that programming. But because we see this variety, people assume that with enough time, the lizard can slowly transform itself into a bird. And it's taught as a fact that dinosaurs turned into birds, and that's where birds came from. That's not, and there's all sorts of problems with it, but let me just explain it with this one example. We're gonna look at, I'm just gonna jump past these. Okay, there's my evolution in action. We've got a bird dog on the left, and we got the catfish here on the right. But but I know that's over the top, and that'll be criticized by those who really believe in evolution, that, we know big steps couldn't happen, but they can't even explain the small steps. But let's look at one animal. These are the kind of things that are in the devotionals that just help wake up people's eyes. There's this little guy called the leafhopper. I like to call him the Olympic gold medal winning insect of the insect kingdom on steroids, because he way out jumps grasshoppers. His whole hind legs are set up like this huge lever to propel him forward. And when he jumps, he accelerates at 400 Gs. Now, test pilots and astronauts, they're put into centrifuges that spin them around and around and around. And when they hit about 10 times the acceleration of gravity, like when I drop something and it hits the floor, it's accelerating all the way down. And that's what happens when you put on the gas pedal and accelerate forward. You feel the force pushing you backwards. But at 10 Gs, you're in danger of blacking out. And I want to just give you a feel for what this insect does. Here's a picture of two ladies spinning at about 10 Gs in that centrifuge. They're moving forward so fast, their faces are being pressed backwards. Okay, now, the leafhopper takes off at 400 Gs. Now, it's just the little nymph, the little immature baby leafhopper, because it doesn't weigh much, that moves that fast, and it literally disappears. It's like a bullet coming out of a gun when it jumps. It's that fast, I can't even follow it. So scientists were trying to figure out, how does this happen? Because here's the problem. We know when a little insect's walking through the forest, dum-de-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum-dum, and his little brain says jump, that message has to go down a nerve fiber, and then it splits. And the message to jump goes to the right leg and the left leg. But we know how fast those nerve signals move. We know nothing is perfect in nature. Nothing's perfectly asymmetric. So the signal is going to reach one of the little protein muscles in one leg before the other one. And one of those legs are going to contract before the other one. So it's like if I want to jump in a straight line and I pushed with the right leg only, I'm going to go sideways at the speed of a bullet. My brain's going to hit the tree. They're going to fly over the forest. I'm going to die. But he doesn't go sideways. He goes straight forward. And they're thinking, how does he get both his legs to work perfectly? Because one of those signals ought to reach the leg before the other leg. So they started to do science and look and observe. And what they found deep down inside of the insect were two perfectly formed gears. Now, it's like if these are his legs, the legs are attached to the gears. If the right leg starts to move, the gears make both legs move in perfect unison. This is so awesome. These are the kind of things God put out there so we would know he exists. Now, how does an evolutionist respond to that? He'll say, wow, that's a really useful. Look what evolution did, because it's useful. And we just stop right there as we send our kids off to school to be brainwashed. You got to go a step further and just ask a question. Well, how did evolution do that? You see, there must have been some insect in the past that didn't have a gear. The only thing they have to work with, and I don't know about this new theory that Dr. Tompkin was talking about, but I mean, this is the classic theory. All the kids have been taught for 100 years. There's a little random change, like a mutation. That's like hitting that little thing that's not a gear. You hit it again, hit it again, hit it again. Now, it might start to form a little fin, a little accidental change. Well, now, you've got one fin sticking out here and nothing here. It's just going to grind away at the inside of the insect. It's going to die. Or maybe you get two over here and one over there. Now it's just going to lock up the legs. Or maybe this one's at this angle and that one's at that angle. Or you know, maybe they're not attached to anything. They're just floating around in there. See, and furthermore, then you've got to have a new muscle attached to that gear that didn't used to be there before. And then you've got to have a nerve come down from the brain and attach to that muscle. And if the nerves, and then the brain's got to know what to do with it all. If the muscle's missing, or the instinct's missing, or the nerve's missing, or the fins are lined up wrong, or at the wrong angle, or they're the wrong length, or the wrong number, nothing's going to work. And meanwhile, the insect's wasting all its energy creating things that it's just going to kill it. See, there is no reasonable explanation for how a random, one step at a time change can create a system where multiple parts of that system are all needed to be there all at once. The truth is absolutely obvious. The two problems with evolution is A, it does not work. It doesn't work scientifically. Never back away from that. And have examples that are simple and easy to understand. And then people have to deal with that truth. And second, it totally undermines God's word and makes it pretend that God is irrelevant for explaining where everything came from. And then the flood is just enormous. The flood is what created the rock layers, and we're going to have lots of talks on that. Just a couple little points to remember. People around us are trained to think in a certain way. It's their perception of looking at the room. It's their perception of looking at the chessboard. And they can't not see it that way because they've been trained to see it that way. That fossils prove evolution. So have a few examples of how that's not true. For instance, and these aren't complex, when a tree dies in a forest, does it turn into a solid rock? Has anybody ever seen that happen? It never happens. It turns back into soil. It doesn't turn into a rock. It requires rapid burial and lots of water with minerals permeating past it, and deep burial before it can decay and turn back into soil. And yet there are trillions of solid rock fossils all over the planet. You know, there were 100 million buffalo in the Great Plains in the 1800s, and the buffalo hunters came out from the 1820s to the 1880s, and they slaughtered them. And then they just took their skins and left the rest to rot, and all the bones to just lay there. There's not a single buffalo fossil in the Great Plains, not one. Fossils aren't forming today. They don't form. Brian Thomas, I asked him this, he's from ICR, he does paleobiobiology, looking for soft tissue in fossils. And he said the only example is maybe some clams that get buried really deep, and then the ocean sediment forms around it, but they're kind of like a hard fossil to begin with. And he couldn't give any other examples he knew of in literature of fossils forming. So we know something happened different in the past. A miner left his hat in a mine in Australia in the 1920s. They closed the mine during the Great Depression, opened up the mine in the 1960s. That leather hat had turned into solid rock in 40 years. Every molecule of leather had been replaced by minerals because it was sitting there in that soft water. Here's a fish eating another fish, and it suddenly forms a fossil because it was buried rapidly and fast. Now, this is something we do overseas, and I'm going to do this. There's a kind of fossil that's so common that you can go on eBay and you can get pieces of it. I got these little pieces of it, and they were only like $5. And I got multiple parts and pieces, and I like to pass these around to the kids so they can touch it and feel them. Here, catch this back here. So there's a fossil, and then I ask the kids what they are, and they touch them and pass them around, and I show them pictures of them, and I give them clues. It's like some sort of a worm or a shellfish or whatever, and they're so common, scientists give them a name. They're called coprolite, and then I tell them what they really are. That's actually poop. Yeah, some of it's dinosaur poop, turtle poop, worms, casings poop. They're the most common kind of fossil you can find. The whole world's filled with solid rock poop in the rock layers. When your dog poops, does it turn into a rock? Never happens. Because it would take a worldwide flood to create coprolite all over the world in rock layers covering all the continents. Because it was a worldwide event. See, these kind of examples help wake people up. Now, last example. This is what goes on all around us, especially in academia. And Kevin referred to that just in the last lecture. You get grants, or no, it was Dr. Ord. You get grants by falling in line with the main kind of scientific consensus. Scientific consensus does not determine truth. It's only what the large group believe. So watch this little film about how strong how people behave around you impacts how the way you behave and think.
And here she is, right on time for her 12 o'clock appointment.
Hi, how are you doing?
This woman thinks she's here for a free eye exam.
Have you been here before? No, it's my first time.
What she doesn't know is that everyone else in this room is working for us.
They'll be with you in just a couple minutes.
Today, we're running an experiment on social conformity, and the test starts now. Did you hear that? These people sure did. It doesn't take long for our test subject to notice a pattern. Beep means stand up. But why? And if you were in her shoes, what would you do the next time the tone sounds? To answer that question, we set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this woman would stand up at the sound of this tone, simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you'd never go along with this. Or would you? After just 3 beeps, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone and nobody is watching her except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there. Now, watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
For a noon appointment. Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Great, thanks so much. Everybody was doing it, so I thought I was supposed to.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Why even this rebel, who wasn't standing for any of this nonsense, eventually joined the ranks. And the only thing more shocking than seeing how easily conformity affects the way you act is that similar forces are subconsciously shaping the way you think.
How people behave and act and think around us affects how we behave and act and think. And it's absolutely true. It's why advertisers spend millions of dollars on advertising and polls are shown before elections. God says, do not be conformed to this world, because this world is bent. Every human heart is bent on escaping from the accountability of God and hiding from him. And making excuses. That's what his response was to his sin. And it's our response too. Don't be conformed to that. You know, is believing the universe and everything made itself wise or foolish? It's foolishness based on what we actually know. Is believing that chemicals could come alive wise or foolish? It's foolishness based on everything we know. That a bacteria could turn into a human being. Huge gaps in all these animals in the fossil record. It's foolishness based on what we know. But the world would rather believe that than be accountable to a creator. And it's only when we allow our mind to be transformed by God's word that we will know the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. Because we don't even know when our thinking is stinking thinking. That's the guide. Now, I want to take the last a little bit more than 5 minutes, and I want to give you an update on what God's done with our teeny little 2-horse cart ministry that I left work for 19 years ago to start, called Search for the Truth Ministries. In 2015, I was invited to come to Fiji, and I suggested after that missions trip where I only spoke to a few students, if we could give one of our creation devotionals to the students, do you think the school system and the principals would let us come in and do a 1-hour science assembly where we show them exactly the same stuff I just showed you? And we end with that peer pressure little video. And he said yes, and the first one was in 2017. And I want to show you what's happened since then. And what we're doing is trying to lead people toward knowing they have to accept Jesus Christ in payment for their sinfulness in order to go to heaven. It doesn't have anything to do with cleaning themselves up or praying more or working really hard or being a good person. It has to do with accepting what he's done for us.
But first you have to convince people that they know beyond anything else, a shadow of a doubt, that God exists and God made them and they are a sinner. And if you don't complete those steps first, you can't get to the third step. So we go into these public high schools. Here's a picture of one of them. We show them the Bible is not just a book of religion. We talk with that first verse of the Bible that talks about science. Where did everything come from? We show them the universe couldn't have made itself. Life couldn't make itself. Apes did not come from people. And then we spend a big chunk of the hour talking about the worldwide flood and the evidence for it. And we wrap up with that presentation of why their textbooks are filled with a different story, because people are trained to leave the truth out. To date, we have been on 24 trips, and by the end of this year, to 9 nations. Now, these books cost about $4 each, and we usually give out 20,000 books, plus the expenses of supporting the trip. They're like a $100,000 expenditure. But think about 20,000 kids who are going to hear the gospel for the first time, most of them, and have a book that connects the Bible to everything else they're learning in their classroom. And knowing God is real instead of just hoping or thinking or wishing. Represents 670 schools, 300,000 high school students in those 8 years. And it's often, this is the only book those kids are ever going to own, because these are third world countries. Now, we have been joined, I can't do all this myself, I never have been able to. It's always been God laying it all out, by people from other ministries, because we'll go out with 2 speakers on teams plus support people to 2 different schools every day in the morning, 2 more in the afternoon, 3 if we can fit them in. And we've had Brian Thomas from the Creation ICR. We've had Tim Chafee from the Answers of Genesis, Eric Hoven from Creation Today, and others, many other speakers. Jay Seegard from Logos. And we end every presentation with at least a 5, sometimes 10-minute sincere helping them understand your salvation doesn't depend on what you have done or who you are or how sinful you are or how good you are, because we're all sinners, and we explain that clearly. It's a gift, just like the book you just got, but you have to admit that you have sinned. God resists the proud and lifts up the humble, and accept what he has done for you and know that he is your Savior and your Creator. And that's the message that they walk out of there with. So we just 3 weeks ago, finished our last trip to Fiji, where we've been through all the high schools twice. And Eric Hoven was with us, and he blended a little 5-minute long video. Now, I'm going to show you this for a reason. We are going to Kenya in July, we're going to Rwanda in August, and we're going to El Salvador in August, we're going to Rwanda in September. And I am short 1 speaker for every single one of those teams. Now, the speakers fund themselves. This is a missions trip, but you get to be part of what you're about to see. It won't be in Fiji, but it's going to be one of those other countries. And if you're interested, let me know, because they're coming up pretty quick. And if we don't get more, we'll just have 1 less team go out on those mornings of the week that we're looking for a 4th speaker. But I want you to watch this video to get a flavor for the impact this is having on these kids and what's going on, what God is doing in these nations overseas, where we're using the public education system to connect the Bible to reality, where for 100 years the Western world has used the education system to disconnect the Bible from reality for these students. It is so powerful. Here's this little video.
All right, Bruce, here we are. This is the the very kind of north tip of the island.
Yes.
The North Island of Fiji. They've already dropped off the books, but we actually have to go to another island by boat.
Yeah, think big boat.
Big boat.
Not that big.
Not
think
that
smaller.
big. Smaller.
Yeah, rowboat that's like extended.
This is our boat. And how cool is it that your books are getting to all these students and they have such a clear gospel presentation and such a clear teaching of how science and scripture go together?
And it's stuff they've never heard. The curriculum's filled with evolution because it's being produced in England and other places. And they're getting to hear that, no, God's been involved in everything. And, and ending with how much he really loves them.
Absolutely.
Over the top.
So
the book they're receiving will be often the only book they own. So it'll be valued. So we are excited. And these outer islands, they don't get visitors. So you can't take a car. There's no bridges.
Yeah.
You gotta load everything in a boat and off we go to visit the schools.
What a blessing.
Yes.
We've just completed an 11-year adventure here in Fiji, where since 2015, we have been to 350 schools and spoken to 130,000 students. Every one of them has gotten our Explore the World book that connects science and history and reality to the Bible. Every one of those 130,000 young lives have heard the clear gospel message of their eternal destiny based on the salvation of Jesus Christ alone, not their efforts. There are going to be so many young people in heaven someday because of what you have done. This has been a $500,000 venture to reach the entire students of the next generation in a nation. And it's only because you have been part of it. You have been praying. You have provided the finances that we've been able to do this. Now, the future has just expanded and exploded. Just this year, we will be going to different nations, speaking on the evidence for creation and giving the gospel message. I can't thank you enough. We could not do this without you, our supporters.
Eric wrote this song. I want you to listen to the words.
Nice, baby. Welcome aboard,
Early
sweetheart.
morning, sun is rising. Load the books, no compromising. Hit the road, we laugh and sing. Another day, the truth we bring. Lauren's driving, steady hand. Through the hills of this island land. Roads get wild, we bounce around. But joy in Christ is what we found. From village roads to every school, we carry truth, not just a tool. Not just stories, not just talk. We bring the rock on which we walk. Bula Vinaka. We have come to share the truth with everyone. Kalosa bulia na vura vura. God created, that is sure. From the start to Calvary, Jesus died for you and me. Hear the truth, don't turn away. Today's the day. Today's the day. Today's the day. Kids are waiting, eyes so wide. We step in with truth and pride. From creation to life is never lost. John Paul lifting boxes high. JJ moving is always fly. Laugh a little, work a lot. Every moment counts for God. Sister Longy sets the pace. Every school the perfect place. Doors are open, hearts are ready. God is moving strong and steady. Fred reminds us why we go. Share the truth so they can know. Not just facts but something more. What their life is really for. The children hear the truth today. Nalolo mai Jesus akasivira. Jesus calls them, shows the way. From the dark into the light. Every heart within his sight. We tell them you are made with care, not by chance you're placed right there. God who formed the earth and sky knows your name and hears your cry. Evolution, Sega Sara. We didn't come from fish, my brother. From the word we stand and say Jesus is the only way. Ula Vinaka. Sing it loud. Sing it loud. Hey. From every school, from every crowd. Kalosa Buliana Bura Bura. God's our maker, strong and sure. From the cross to empty grave, Jesus came to seek and save. Fiji, here's the message true. God
So, I thank Eric Hovind for that. So if you want to join us, I'll try to talk you out of it. We were up some mornings at 4 a.m. and got back at 9 p.m. You never know what you're going to run into. We're going to 3 new countries I haven't been to, but we have a missionary who's doing our overseas planning, and he goes in advance and sets everything up, and we work with people in the country that know what they're doing. So that gives you a flavor of what God's doing in other countries. Sadly, not yet in ours, but we need to pray. And individually, we need to get that truth in front of people. So thank you so much.